Hello, it is Jacob Jackson here today with my assignment 1 game that is called Kung Fu Animals: The Road to Master. So we'll jump right into our game with the imports. So I imported time and random just for extra things that you can add to the game, and I will go over that later with my examples. So at the start of the game, we always have a def game. Basically, it's a function that can loop to the top whenever we input the game function. So at the end of our program, we would most likely say, okay, you won or you lost, and then loop it back to the top so they can play again or try a different strategy. So here at the top of the screen, we have inventory used to declare all like the variables. So we have turn, health, strike, enemy 1 or E1, mission 1, and is silent, which we'll go over later. So we have also a very important variable that is SC equals 0, and this is used in front of all of our time.sleep inputs. So I can go through the program without having to wait all those seconds in between just to see what I've done. So here we used a \n to just create basically a list order. I've also created this amazing while loop up here. So basically the while loop will make sure that the program keeps running and keeps looping until what I have said is done. So basically, animal is not equals to snake, and animal is not equal to monkey and panda. So basically I listed off all the possible animals, and if it's not equal to that, it keeps looping. So if they say a rabbit, the rabbit's not in the game, so it keeps looping until they have basically done a proper animal or inputted a proper animal. So here we have animal equals animal.upper, so this is used in case the user makes the program have like a capital S, lowercase n, capital A. It will convert it all to capital so I can use it in my while statement. So here we have an if statement, and this is basically they have to choose when to move on, and then we have a else option down here in case they input something like rabbit, like we said. Oh, and basically in here they just would input an animal like so, and then it would choose their stats and what kind of player they are in the game. So here we have a little mini game to get ready for the awesome journey that they're about to go on. So we used mathematics in this sequence to basically show mathematic ability and to have a little funny action or attribute to the game. So here we have a bunch of multiplication and division to make basically a massive number, so which they can also input a float. So once they input a float, then it will come out as a float. That will be a giant number, and then it would just need to basically add the str. So I'm just showing you if we input a number, we need to make it a string first of all. So we did that same over here with another float mini game. So that's just a mini game up there, a little joke. And then we have our floats here, basically tricking him to say mission 1, they're ready to go. So we go through the sequence of basically introducing them to the mission, and then we have the while statement up here. So this is basically loops until we get what they want. Basically m is not equal to 1 and m is not equal to 2. So just to make sure that all the mission is keeps looping until mission 2, basically. So we have this if statement here, which is kind of a concept used to decide turns in the game. So basically one would be, actually, no, this is to find if it's silent or not silent. So there's two different options. But then in this if statement, there's a second if statement with those, just a tab in, which would create a dice roll, basically creating turns. So if it is 1, it would be your turn, and if it is 2, it would be the enemy's turn. This is basically like an interesting scoring system to create kind of a turn system, basically. So this is what we were talking about earlier with random.radiant. That's why we would import a random at the top. So dice is random.radiant 1 to 10. So this would basically create a random number used by a generator to find a number and put it into the variable dice. And then we would use that dice to further play the game. So we have a concept here, which is turn 2 equal signs is if it is turned to 1 and 1 equal sign is make it turn to 1. So it's just an interesting concept there that I used. We used another while loop up here. This is basically keeps looping until health is 0 or enemy is 0. So this is the main fighting sequence of my game. So we use the turns like we stated earlier with turn 1 is my turn, turn else or the enemy turn is is turn 2. So at the end of turn 1, we would use these turn +1 or turn +1 to make it 2, and then it would loop again and go to the else and just keep looping. So I had a little problem here that, the people who were playing the game wouldn't get to do anything in our game, so I made it possible for 3 inputs to decide the damage or the odds of getting a hit. So we would convert the input to an int to make sure they can input a number, and then it's just basically conducting the user to input a number from 1 to 10 and use a different number each time to make the odds a little higher. So we inputted a random radiant to basically sway the odds. So dice 1 is not equal to this, and the dice 1 is not equal to another move and the second move. So basically 3 moves, and if dice 1 is not equal to any of them, then basically, yeah, if the dice isn't equal to any of them, then you would get a hit. So in this line, we converted a number input to a string, so we could basically input numbers into the string without an error causing. You could force an error by getting rid of string, which would just be strike, and it'd think it's a word, except it would input a number, and the system would not take that. So if we just undo that, we could definitely find some problems in that work. So here's something interesting that I did is game 2. So we added another function. So we treat each mission as a new def game 2, basically. So I can control it if they win or lose. They can either move on or they'd either move on or die and go to the top of the game. So here we have a new basically mission to go on, and we have to list our variables at the top of the list again because it's basically treating it like a whole new game. So just going up again, this fighting scene is basically used throughout the program, used for moves against players. So if the dice is equal to an input or is equal to a chance of 3 inputs, the health would minus, and if it is not, it would just dodge that attack and go back to the other person's turn. We add an if statement in an if statement to just make sure if the health is 0, then they go back to the top of the game using this function game. So this is basically the mission 2. We had a nice while loop in here, basically repeating the fighting scene, but just changing the names and the variables on each game to make sure that the game flows properly. So you have another while loop, basically stating if the user wants a silent attack or a loud attack, and this can sway whether the odds of the game. So here's our last fighting scene, and basically this fighting scene will decide if they have won the game or not won the game. So I chose to include the if statements in an if statement to decide if they had a good game, and not outside of the whole loop, to make sure that it is all consistent. So this function will just bring them back to the top. So say if health is 0, you've died, good game. Scroll all the way to the top again. Boom. Def game again. So also time we imported to make sure that the time sleep, basically a break between each group of words, so the user has time to read it and the user has time just to read the statement before they move on. We use this \n to create more of a list in our program, and that's it for my program. So the game is very interesting, a lot of fighting scenes, which can be very interesting, and it ends off at around 438 lines of code. Many fun things to do here. So I'll run the code for you once, just to show you how the program runs. So you choose a animal, and then you'd get ready for your mini game, and I'll just go through the mini game and then I will call it a day. So input is the biggest number you can get in 3 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. After doing some math, you will need this float number. We use that in our game, and basically a little joke here. So good luck and have a lot of fun playing my game. Thank you very much.